All right. As I was saying, we are going to be looking at vulnerability management at a very, very high level, introducing some concepts that we hear more when you talk about vulnerability management. So let's start with, when you hear vulnerability, what comes to mind? When you hear vulnerabilities, I think when we did the threat and threat actors, I believe Simi touched a little about vulnerability, but it wasn't much. So we are going to look into it a little more detail here. So when you hear vulnerability, we talk about the weaknesses, the shortcomings, the flaws, the mistakes that exist in our assets or your system. This could be in a software, it could be in a hardware, it could be in a process, it could be in a library, it could even be in people. People have weaknesses, people have flaws as well. So anything that is a weakness or you find to be a weakness or a flaw or any shortcoming in your system is what we call a vulnerability. And also, if it stands a chance of being compromised, of being exploited, if that vulnerability has a chance of being exploited, right? Or that weakness have a chance of being exploited. That's what we call a vulnerability. So any weakness that you see, and this can come in form of a misconfiguration, it can come in form of social engineering that manipulates our psychological effect. It can come in form of a phishing, it can come in form of patch software. Vulnerabilities can come in different forms when you talk about vulnerability. So anything that you feel is a weakness or a flaw or shortcoming to your asset or even to a person, and that stands a chance of being exploited or compromised, is what we call a vulnerability. Let's talk about the types of vulnerabilities. In cybersecurity, we have three major types of vulnerability. We have the vulnerabilities that exist in operating systems, we have the application vulnerabilities, and we have the configuration vulnerability, which is usually called misconfiguration. Now, I don't know if you've been opportune to see the number of codes or the number of commands that makes up an operating system. When you see this, you see us buy the operating system, maybe Windows, Linux, or Mac operating system, you buy it. If you're opportunity to view the source code of an operating system, you will see that these are made up of millions of code lines, millions of lines in code. And these codes are designed by human beings, they are written by human beings like us. They are not spirits. It's human beings that write operating system codes. So because we are not perfect, human beings are not perfect, the codes that we write can have vulnerability or there may be an oversight from the developer, and then they put in something that could open up a backdoor in the operating system and then cause a vulnerability or bring about shortcomings or weaknesses in the code that they wrote. The same thing applies to applications. Applications are made up of codes, although you can compare the number of lines of code in application to what is in our operating system, but it is still designed by people, by humans, and these people can also make mistakes or have a shortcoming in their code that could open up a point of vulnerability that an attacker can easily compromise. Then we have the configuration. When we talk about the configuration vulnerability, this is the one that you and I do most times. You see us configure something and we don't configure it the right way, or we did not follow the best practice provided by the vendor to configure that, or somebody will buy a device now and you're running it with the default configuration that is anywhere on the internet. So when you misconfigure your device, your phones, whatever it is, you are opening up a vulnerability or a backdoor, which can easily be compromised. So these are the major three types of vulnerability, or where we will see vulnerability most when we talk about that in cybersecurity. Now let's talk about what is vulnerability management. Now you know what is vulnerability. When you talk about the management of this vulnerability, it is a continuous process of identifying, assessing, reporting, managing, and remediating vulnerability across systems and assets. So first of all, is for you to have a vulnerability, and then you decide how you're going to deal with this vulnerability. There are a lot of things that goes into vulnerability management. Ranging from the identification, the assessment, the remediation, the detection, the reconfirmation, and all that. A lot of things goes into vulnerability management. So when you put in all the activities that happens during vulnerability, we are doing what you're working on vulnerability. That's what we call vulnerability management, because you have to identify the vulnerability, you have to assess them, you have to report them, you have to remediate them, you have to retest them after you've identified them. And this is across our systems, our data, both software and hardware. So all this process, like we say here, is a continuous process. It's not a one-time thing. So you continue to do vulnerability management in your environment. If you have a large environment that you need to be on top of at all time. We do not do vulnerability management just because of the assets that we have. Many people will also do it for regulatory purposes so that they can stay compliant. If your organization is working with maybe your organization collects a credit card as form of their business functions, they are meant to abide by the PCI DSS compliance. So you need to be looking out for any vulnerability that could be exploiting a PCI DSS or could be coming against the PCI DSS standard. And how do you do that? Is when you have a vulnerability management for your continuous process of doing all that, right? So it involves a lot of things. I don't know if you've seen the CI/CD pipeline logo that have a continuous loop, like an infinite loop. That's how vulnerability management is. It's infinite, it doesn't have ending. So it's a continuous process that happens. If you finish today, tomorrow you're starting a new version of management. You finish that one, you're starting a new version of management, because as much as we try to keep up to date with the threat landscape, new ones are coming up every day. The attackers are not sleeping. That is why we say that all we do in cybersecurity is more of study. When you study as much as you are, you're studying to meet up with the attackers and the bad guy, because they are studying more than you do. So every day, new vulnerabilities are being found, and attackers are finding ways to exploit them. Heaven helps you if it is a zero-day vulnerability, which nobody ever prepares for. But all of them are what we do when we talk about vulnerability management. These are all that comes into place. So you continuously monitor, continuously identifying the vulnerabilities that exist in your environment, try to find the best way to remediate it, report it to the team, and also see if there are things you can do to manage it better. Now, we have vulnerability management, we have vulnerability assessment. These are not the same. It's just that, they are not the same, obviously. But vulnerability management is an ongoing process with continuous monitoring. That's vulnerability management. But vulnerability assessment is a one-time evaluation, which is part of a vulnerability management. So when you're doing vulnerability management, vulnerability assessment is part of what you would do at that point. So when you do the assessment for that time, you are done. And then you go to the next activity in the vulnerability management. But for vulnerability management itself is an ongoing process. When you do assessment of vulnerability, you want to finish it up, you want to report it, you want to assign it to people that will remediate it, you want to retest it and all that. So that is you doing vulnerability assessment. Is a one-time thing you do during your vulnerability management process. But then when you finish that and start another instance of the vulnerability management, you do it again. So vulnerability management is part of your, vulnerability assessment is part of your vulnerability management program. Ask your question before we continue. Questions. Okay, let's continue. Now we have a life cycle, however you want to pronounce that word, of vulnerability management. When organizations decide to build a vulnerability management program, they have to include a lot of things in the process, because these are all what makes up vulnerability management process, or like many will call it, vulnerability management program. So it's a full program that you do for an organization would do, just to make sure they understand their threat landscape and where they stand. When an organization is designing a vulnerability management, the first thing they want to do is to do their asset categorization or asset discovery. You need to know the assets in your environment. We talk about assets, we talk about your softwares, your hardwares that you need to test for vulnerability. So the first thing you need to do in the vulnerability management process is to know what and what do you even have. What and what am I even assessing here? If you don't know if you don't have a comprehensive list of your assets, I wonder how you're going to run the vulnerability assessment on those devices. So the first thing you do here is to actually know what do you have and what is their category or what is their prioritization, which is also another one. But then let's not get to prioritization yet. So the first thing is you discover your assets, know what and what is it that you have. After you've listed the comprehensive list of your softwares and your hardwares, remember softwares are anything that is running on your computers. It could be the operating system itself is also part of what you understand, what you have, the version you have, the updates available in it, the hardwares you have. You need to know the model, the type of hardwares that they are relying on, and all that details, because vulnerability exists both in hardware and in software as well. Then once you've discovered your assets, you can now go ahead and do the vulnerability assessment. Vulnerability assessment is where you scan the system to identify the security gaps, what and what are missing. If you're using a commercial vulnerability assessment tool, it will be able to identify and see all the vulnerability that exists. So vulnerability is just like the weaknesses, the security gap that exists in the software. It could be that you're using an old version of the software, or if you're using a legacy system, it will even detect the patch of the system that you're using and know that this is a legacy application or a legacy hardware that needs to be isolated from your environment. So once you discover the asset, the next one is for you to do the vulnerability assessment. That is doing your scanning. Scan the system, scan the software, scan the hardware. That will identify the vulnerabilities that exist. Now that we know the vulnerabilities that exist, how do we patch this? In what order do we patch this? This is where your prioritization comes in. Now, that you discover the vulnerability right now does not mean that that vulnerability is critical to your environment, right? You need to prioritize the vulnerabilities and how you're going to remediate them based on their order of importance to your business functions. You cannot have, because 80% of time when you do a vulnerability scan, expect to have at least 20 or 50 vulnerability that has been detected. How you remediate these depends on their order of prioritization in your environment, specific to your environment. How is exploiting those vulnerabilities? How will it affect your environment? Is it critical to your environment if that vulnerability is being exploited? Or is it going to affect your business function in any way? So you prioritize which system you are going to remediate first, depending on their order of importance to your business criticality and business function. Now, we are not saying prioritize it based on the severity of the vulnerability. You prioritize based on their impact on the exploitation on your business. This is where risk analysis comes in if you're doing risk analysis. So you need to know in what order do I patch this vulnerability based on my business? Which of them, if exploited right now, will cause more damage to my organization? Even if the one that I've been exploited of severity low or something, as long as you know that the impact will be much on your business, you're going to prioritize that one and fix it first before you go into the next one. So that is where the prioritization comes in. Now we have decided in the order we are going to remediate. We now go ahead and remediate this. Here we call it the remediation process. You now go ahead and apply the mitigation process to fix the vulnerability. The mitigation process could be, installing the new version of the software. It could be putting on a compensation controls like workarounds, depending on what is available for the specific vulnerability you're trying to patch. But the thing is, however, the vendor or whatever information you have to patch that vulnerability, you apply it at this moment. to patch it. Now, patching the vulnerability is one thing. Confirming that the vulnerability has been patched is another thing. I've seen a situation where my customer complain about a specific vulnerability that they want to patch. We give them the instruction on how to patch the vulnerability. They just went ahead and ran the process of the patching it. Few months again, only for them to come back and say that they were exploited, that their system were compromised, but then they patched this vulnerability so months ago. Why was it still exploited in the environment? Only for you to find out that after they finished patching, they did not reconfirm that the vulnerability was actually patched. That is where verification comes in. So when you discover your asset, do your vulnerability assessment, you prioritize, you remediate. The next and one of the most important thing to do is your verification. You need to retest. You need to rerun the scan again to see if that vulnerability has actually been patched. Because we've seen situations where customers or even vendors will install a patch, but then the system that installing it is leaving an old copy, a previous copy of the vulnerable version in the system. So if it is still there, it means your system has not really been patched. So how do you know it's been patched? Is that when you retest and then you see the vulnerability still exists, you need to go and find where is it pointed at, even if you have remediated and you have installed a new patch. But some system will not automatically delete old copies of softwares or binaries that are in your system unless you go by yourself and delete it. So if you still have a copy of the old version, don't you see that you're not really patched? Even though you installed a new version, but a copy of the old version still exists somewhere. So you are not really patched. You are still vulnerable to that specific vulnerability. So that is where verification comes in, which we call confirmation. For you to confirm that you have patched, you need to rescan the environment and make sure that that vulnerability does not come up again or is not detected on that system over again. If it does, then you need to go back and see where is it pointing into? Is it that the remediation or the patch that you provided or that the vendor provided is not working, or is it that you did not patch correctly, or you patched correctly, but then there is a copy of the old one still existing over there? So all this is what you need to figure out when you do your vulnerability management. So you see some people call this the DARC process, which is detect, analyze, remediate, and confirm. All these are still also part of this problem, but that is more a professional word that we use when we talk about vulnerability management process. DARC. You detect, you assess, you remediate, and then you confirm after you've remediated. But all of them still falls into this asset discovery, vulnerability assessment, prioritization, remediation, and verification. Now, like I said here, that a vulnerability has a severity of high does not really mean that it has a high impact to your business. That is where the prioritization comes in. You need to decide which of these vulnerability, if exploited, will cause more harm to my organization. You can have a vulnerability that have a severity of critical, but then if exploited, it doesn't cause any problem to your environment. And you have another one with a medium, you know that if exploited, it has a lot of business impact to you. So within these two, you need to find which one you're going to patch first. Of course, you're going to patch the one that will affect your environment the most. So when you patch a vulnerability, you don't patch based on the severity of that vulnerability. You patch based on the impact of the exploitation to your business. Ask your questions, please. Go ahead and ask your questions.
All right. Let me just ask, talking about patching, right? Like the CM's gonna tell you the level of severity, right? The priority.
Yeah, so when you do your scanning and then when you use the tool to scan, the tool is going to detect the vulnerability, and then it's going to rely on the MV database to pull the details of that vulnerability. It will tell you what the critical, the severity of that is based on CVSS score. So you will see the severity of that vulnerability. But the severity is only general. You also need to have your own internal mechanism that you detect and plan your own severity based on your business impacts. But the scanning system will tell you the general CVSS score that is available for that vulnerability. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, your organization risk appetite will detect on it. Yeah, that is true. That is true. Okay, no more question. Let me continue here. Now, there are many things that comes in mind when we talk about vulnerability management tools. We're not going to go through all of these, but we're going to go into some of them because some of them are very, very in-depth. And if I start going through them, like CISACA, EPSS, we're going to sleep here. So we're going to talk about, I think it's the first scanner, CVD, MVD, and CVSS. That's what we're going to be discussing today. For the CISACA, EPSS, SSVC, and the reporting, we're going to be taking that at the specialization area. So let's go ahead. When you have a very good vulnerability management program, you need to consider each of these two. You need to have access to each of these two because each of them provide information that the other one doesn't provide at maybe at a more detailed base and other details. So let's go ahead and see what each of these two does and the part they play in vulnerability management program. First of all is the scanner, vulnerability scanners, right? These are the tools that helps us to run the scan on our systems. Remember, when you're running a scan, you could be running an endpoint scan, which is, the one you run on client machines. You could be running a network scan, which is the one you run on network devices, right? So whichever one you're running, you need a platform or a tool that will allow you to run the scan. That's where the vulnerability scanners. So we say these are automated security tools that identify, classify, and prioritize vulnerabilities. It also identifies application, operating system, and misconfiguration flaws. If you have a very good vulnerability scanner, like Nessus or Qualys, and you run a scan on a specific computer, it will be able to detect if there is an OS security gap, application gap, or if there is any misconfiguration that is existing in the environment. So these are the tools. We have the open source tools. We also have the commercial tool. And of course, if you're running a business and want to really have a top-notch management vulnerability management program, you want to go for a commercial tool because they provide support, they will provide updates, unlike an open source tool, right? So how do this vulnerability scanner works? They scan your environment against a known database of vulnerabilities. So they scan your system using the information available in database. We'll talk about that database later, and then provide actionable reports to remediate the identified vulnerabilities. When you use most of these paid vulnerability scanner, they do not only provide you with the vulnerabilities and their details and all that, it also tell you how you can remediate it because the database they are calling for that scan also provides, maybe they provide some remediation plans or workaround or compensating controls. So the scanners will also provide you that details, making you have just a one place where you do a kind of a central dashboard where you have all the information that you need for you to do your vulnerability assessment. So the ones listed here are the common ones, but we have more of them. These are more like the ones you see mostly in businesses, and the one listed here are mostly, except from OpenVAS. OpenVAS is an open source. The rest of these ones here are commercial ones that you can actually pay for. We also have the Rapid7. We also have Nmap. Nmap wouldn't go as deep as any of these vulnerability scanners right here. So it depends on the type of program an organization wants to run will determine which of the scanners they will go for and also what their pockets can afford. Most vendors will provide you the on-prem solution, and most of them are also accessible as a software as a service. over the cloud. So it all depends on the subscription that you have with the vendor. But most of them will provide you a very good vulnerability management platform to do your scanning and your prioritization and other details that you need for that. So that is a scanner. Ask your questions.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Talking about those vulnerability tools, especially the scanners. The tripwire is the tripwire also a commercialized one or an open source one?
I don't really know I don't even know, to be honest. I know of OpenVerse is open source, but I don't know if Tripwire is a commercial or OpenVerse. You can check and let us know. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So the reason why I'm just asking, I I installed the tripwire, okay, but I don't know if I'm just using it openly or it's gonna ask me to to subscribe for it because
I mean,
I'm
if
using
you're
it
if
to.
you if you're able to install it and you have been using it, and then it's not asking you for subscription and it's not telling you that you're having a trial version, then it could be that it is open. It could be anybody can have it. I really don't know. But if not, it should be telling you that you're running a trial version or give you a so amount of days, or maybe just like a Tenable scanner with their free version will only let you run about 3 IPs, or is it 3 or 15 IPs? I've forgotten. But if you want to go commercial to scan more IP addresses, you need to buy the version, the paid version. So even though Tenable is commercial, but they have the free version as well that you can use, but it has limitations. So if Tripwire is not open source, then it could be also one of those ones that have the free version, but with limited
With
functionalities.
limited functionalities.
Yeah.
So, but the category that I was using it is quite different from the from being a scanner vulnerability tool because I'll be using it to monitor the files on my system.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it all depends on what the scanners can do. All of them don't do the same thing. So each of them provide their own unique functionality. It depends on what organizations want to go for.
Okay, okay, all right. Thank you.
All right. Question. Okay, someone was asking, did you sign a license agreement when you were installing it? Is there like a license agreement they put when you were trying to install the tripwire?
No, the only thing they asked me when I was so I installed it on my Linux system, okay, because it's
Okay.
Linux based application. So I only provided the password of my the root password, and also it's suggested to put a very secure password because it says it's something that is so sensitive. So those are the
Okay.
basic things that I input. That's it.
All
And
right.
once you forget the password that you implemented during the installation, you don't roll back to it. So it's so important to um write it somewhere so that you don't forget it.
Oh, honestly, I've not installed the tripwire. I use mostly Tenable. I use mostly
Okay.
Mesos Tenable. So I've not, sometimes I do use OpenVR, but that is if I'm working in my lab environment because that one is open source. But I've never had to use Tripwire, so I really don't know how it works.
Yeah, Tripwire is just a film, file, integrity monitor. So if there is something that, for instance, an attacker goes into your system and modify a certain, host file or something, then the Tripwire will give you alerts.
So it monitors for integrity of files mostly.
Exactly. Yeah, that's his
Gotcha.
basic, functionality. Yeah.
Okay. So it
Yeah.
doesn't really do much of scanning though.
No, no, no. So that's why I'm asking you the question. Maybe it might have that
Mm-hmm.
also, that functionality. But what I'm
Oh,
basically using it for is just to check the integrity of the files.
okay. All
Yeah.
right. That's
Okay.
okay. All right. Any other question before we proceed? All right. Let's continue. So that is it about scanner. Now let's talk about CVE, common vulnerability and exposure. Now, when you talk about known vulnerabilities, how do we know that a vulnerability is a known vulnerability? This is because the MITRE Corporation, in conjunction with the NIST, has decided that vulnerabilities that are identified, there needs to be a way for us to know that that vulnerability exists. And that is where CVE comes in. So CVE is a list of all publicly disclosed cybersecurity vulnerabilities and their descriptions. This is how we know that this vulnerability exists. And then the CVE of that vulnerability helps you also track the details about that vulnerability. So you talk about CVE is a list of all the publicly disclosed cybersecurity vulnerabilities, and when you view the specific one, it will tell you more details about the vulnerability, maybe the attack vector, tell you about how it can be exploited, the patching or the affected operating system, the vendor system, the version that's affected, and probably make recommendations on the remediation, which could be a compensating control, or could be also that there is a permanent patch for it as well. So when we talk about CVE, is a list of all the publicly available cybersecurity vulnerabilities and their descriptions. So CVE will give it has a unique ID for all known vulnerabilities and free for public use. So you can go to the CVE website and you're able to track a specific vulnerability. If you know the vulnerability, it will give up vulnerability an ID. So all known vulnerability comes with a CVE ID. They have been assigned a CVE ID that makes it easy for professionals to track that specific vulnerability. And it's available for both hardware and software vulnerabilities. When we talk about vulnerabilities, remember they exist on both hardwares and softwares. So any of them that has been identified will have a CVE detail attached to that vulnerability. It also provided the product affected version and the patched version. That's what I already mentioned. So it's part of the description that it provides. And then this list is maintained by the MITRE Corporation. They are the organization that maintains this. So they modify, they make changes if there is any. Once organizations have determined that there is a flaws in their system, they will reach out to the MITRE Corporation, the CNA. They reach out to the CNA, the Common Name Authority. Common Naming, is it common? I think it's Common Naming Authority for vulnerabilities, to assign it a CVE ID, and then they will be populating it in the CVE website. Then the details of that vulnerability will be maintained by the MITRE Corporation. And you can access all the CVEs on cve.org and search for your favorite CVE ID. I have few favorite ones, right? Some of these, there's what we call the celebrity vulnerabilities. I have a few celebrity vulnerabilities, and then I have my favorite vulnerabilities. Why they are my favorite is because the vulnerability that have shown me shaggy. Both the one I have been attacked one, maybe my firewall was brought down, was not last year, by one vulnerability like that. And also many of our customers were also brought down by that vulnerability. So it is my favorite vulnerability because I had a first-hand experience of that vulnerability. That's why I call it my favorite vulnerability. And I don't forget it in a hurry. So let's go to the CVE website to look at some of these vulnerabilities. This for you're laughing at me. That vulnerability dealt with me. Oh, chai. There is things that you will go through, you will not forget them in a hurry. That vulnerability was one of them. Forgetting the code is far from me. I won't forget that code. So this is the CVE website. If you come here, it lists about 326,000 CVE records. That's what it knows. If you know the CVE ID, you can search the CVE ID here, and then it will give you the details of that CVE. So here we'll keep a list of all publicly known vulnerabilities. Now, that my favorite CVE that I don't forget in a hurry is 2024. Yeah, it was 2024 CVE 3400. This is the CVE. This is a CVE that attacked a firewall, and it was a critical CVE. It dealt with me. It dealt with me personally. It dealt with my customers a lot. So this is the CVE. You see, provide the description of this CVE, this vulnerability, provide the organization or the vendor product that is affected. Right here, I say a pan-OS arbitrary file creation leads to OS command injection vulnerability in a Global Protect. Global Protect is a remote access VPN for Palo Alto Network. So this CVE was attacking the firewalls where Global Protect portal and gateway was configured. And believe me when I say this vulnerability was brutal. It was brutal. See the score now. See, severity was critical, and the score, the CVSS score was 10. So it was a brutal CV. It's not a celebrity CV because it does not attack a neutral, maybe a binary or a module that most operating systems use. This is specific to one vendor, right? Unlike the Log4j severity, the Log4j vulnerability we had in 2022 that attacked almost all vendors that are developing hardware devices, operating systems that are based on Linux. As at that time, that is a celebrity CVE. This one is not a celebrity CVE, but it dealt with customers that had these products and running a Global Protect. I was one of those people that it dealt with. So here you see it provides you the description, the vendor, the severity, the CVSS score. This was brutal. Then the affected versions of operating system, where it is affected, it has the affected from this to this, unaffected from this to this. So if you are running the operating system that had the affected version, trust me, it's just a matter of time before that you got exploited. And when it started like a 0 day. It was a 0 day when it started. When this vulnerability started, it started as a 0 day. So there was no patch for this when it started. That was why it was very critical, and it caused a lot of damages for us at that time before the operating system that fixed them started coming out. So this is the CVE details for that CVE ID. You can go here and search for any CVE ID that you want. You can search for another one. I think we had another one early this year, but it wasn't as brutal as this, 2026 0227. This was another one of the current CVEs that we have, but it wasn't as brutal as the first one. See, the severity was low, and this was not a 0 day vulnerability as well. So this one wasn't that much of a problem, but then, you know, this was not a 0 day, so there was a patch before it was even populated. So it was also another one. So if you have your vulnerability ID, you can search them here and view more details about that vulnerability. It was exploited. Oh yeah, listen, it was exploited. And this vulnerability, not this one, no, the first one, the 2024 vulnerability, it was highly exploited. When I say highly exploited, and the only way we could recover from that vulnerability was once your firewall is attacked, it will shut down the firewall. It shuts down the firewall. The firewall, you will not be seeing, and it was able to do privilege escalation as well for that vulnerability. So the entire file system on the firewall got corrupt. The only way we could recover from it was doing what we call advanced factory reset. So you are not just doing a regular factory reset, it's an advanced factory reset where you delete everything on the firewall and then install a new operating system that is not affected. After that, you start changing the entire master key, secret keys on the firewall. That was a lot of work to recover because when it came out, it was a 0 day, right? So we thought that the patch could be just do a regular factory reset. But after factory reset, we found out that the artifacts of that exploitation was still living on the firewall. So the only way to clear it up was to do an advanced reset. That is, do away with your operating system entirely and install a fresh operating system on the device. That was the only way we could get rid of that vulnerability, that threat at the time. So it was a massive one for us. That's why this is the highest I've had to work on, this vulnerability. And because I was also directly attacked, I was trying to patch my customers. I forgot to patch myself. The day my firewall went down, up to today, that firewall is still sitting somewhere in my living room because it died. I couldn't even do a factory reset on that one because that was a low model firewall. So factory reset doesn't even work on that one. I have to do entirely replacement of the firewall. And that was not my only firewall. Another firewall that I control somewhere was also attacked at that time. And that firewall did not recover. I had to get a very new firewall for that location as well. So it was a very big one for us at that time. Ask your question before we move away from here.
Yeah, I have a question concerning these two vulnerabilities I just mentioned.
Go
Did
ahead.
you, when you had the that attack, did you revoke did you revoke I mean the product from the Palo Alto, because I know that it's from Palo Alto, right? He's the vendor. Did you have like a report for that? Like, did you ask them if they can refund your money or some? Is it doable? I'm just
So
asking.
that's not how it works. If your
Yeah,
device is attacked, because Palo Alto is not the only people that are having vulnerability. Cisco have vulnerability.
yeah,
IBM, everybody has
yeah,
vulnerability, right? So we
yeah,
understand in the field that vulnerabilities can come in. What we want to make sure is that when a vendor discovers one, they are able to provide a patch for their customers. And if a vendor discovers it first, they will be able to provide a patch before it's been exploited. What happened on, like this one I'm showing here, did not escalate because it was not a 0 day. It was discovered internally. So before it was made public, there was already a patch for it. So we just made it public and then asked customers to update to the new version. Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me?
Oh, we stopped hearing
yeah,
you.
yeah.
No,
You freeze
you
for us for
stopped.
some seconds.
Is it back now?
Now it's better now.
Yes,
Okay.
my
So when this particular one came out early this year, it wasn't a 0 day, it was a DOS, it was a denial of service on the firewall for the same Global Protect solution, but it wasn't a 0 day because it was discovered internally and there was a patch. So before it was made public, we already had a patch the operating system to that, right? So customers, not a lot of people were attacked on this one. Unlike on that first one, that 2024 vulnerability, that was a 0 day. Nobody was expecting it. So before the company even know about it, it was already being actively exploited and firewalls were being brought down. So as soon as they provided a compensating controls at that time, which they had a threat signature to stop the spreading of that, to try to curtail the privilege escalation that was going on then before the operating systems came out. But because it was a 0 day, many firewalls were affected. But the good thing was we were able to recover as much as we can. The only firewalls that we are not able to recover, if it's a VM firewall, that means you need to deploy a fresh new VM. Or if you're running a low model firewall like PA 2020, 200, then you need those ones, you cannot do a factory reset on them. Those ones, when they are attacked, the firewalls are down. So the company will send the customers a new set of firewalls for them to reconfigure in the environment. So it's not
Yeah,
like it's something at the end of the world, but if your firewall goes down and it can't come up, the company will send you a new firewall. It's part of your contract with them.
yeah. So, talking about the firewall that you're talking about, that you said you cannot rewrite it, like even putting resetting it, and you said this at your home, like no more using it. So does it mean that you're done with it, like you just lose it like that?
Oh, the firewall is dead, So if you
Are you
have a
stick?
contract,
Yeah,
contract with the
yeah,
vendor, your contract
yeah.
is that if your firewall dies, they will provide you a new firewall. It's called RMA, right? They will RMA you a fresh new firewall for you to reconfigure your environment. I got a new firewall from them. I got another firewall.
Okay, that's why I'm asking you.
Yeah, that one is there. It's right here. I can't return it because, number one is that the firewall was at the point of end of support, or is already end of
End of
purchase.
life.
It was almost
Yeah,
at the end of support. So there was no need for
yeah.
me to return it back, but I got a new firewall.
Okay, okay.
But
All
if
right.
you are running a firewall that is still within end of support, has not reached end of support, you have to return it back to the company. But mine was already end of support, so they didn't need it back. I just got another
Okay.
one.
So I have another question also.
Okay.
Um, Assuming that it's not a physical firewall that you purchase and it's a WAF, like web-based ones, and there is a vulnerability in it. how does that one work, like in terms of restoring it back?
Which if it's not a physical, if it's what, a VM
If
firewall?
it's like, yeah, so assuming that it's like just a web-based, WAF, for instance.
I don't know about why, because I know I don't support, but a one firewall should have, the vendor should be able to provide what do you call it? They should be able to provide the patch for the underlying hypervisor that is running it, if it's a hypervisor stuff. If you have a web firewall, web application firewall, it should be running, maybe it's a cloud solution, right? And then if it has a vulnerability, the cloud provider should be able to know how they will do it, because all these things are different based on vendors, right? Not all of them will require you to change the entire device. We've had a lot of vulnerabilities over the years. It's only this one that, to the best of my knowledge, it's only this one that attack firewall physically and brings it down. But that does not
Okay.
mean that is not the only one. We've had lots and lots of vulnerabilities that did not bring down the firewall. All you need to do is to do an operating system upgrade or reconfigure the firewall, and you're good.
Okay.
So it all
Thank you
depends
so
on how that attack, what the attack vector is, or if there is any proof of concept for that vulnerability. That is how the vendors will determine the best way to patch that vulnerability.
much. Okay. All right. Got you. Thank you.
Get it as your internal network and use it as a honeypot. I can't use it as a honeypot because the firewall is down. If I plug it if I just turn it on, it only stays at the booting stage. It doesn't even boot up for me to log in. So the firewall is down. I wish I could put it as a honeypot. That would be a good one, but I can't even get it booted up to put it in my segregate it in my network. So I can't even use it as a honeypot. All right, questions before we continue. Any other question here about CVE? Okay, let's go back to our slides and continue. Now let's talk about the next one is NVD, National Vulnerability Database. So NVD and CVE cannot do the same thing. The only difference is that NVD provides a more detailed explanation about a CVE, and it's also a central repository for all known vulnerabilities and all the information from different sources. Like if I have a vulnerability right now and there are more than 5 sources that have written about that vulnerability, I will not see all those details on CVE website, but I will see all those details on NVD. So NVD will provide, is a more central, if you want to know more details about or the opinions of different people on a specific CVE, you can find that on NVD. NVD will provide, is a central repository for all known vulnerability, and it provides more detailed information about that CVE ID. It will tell you if that CVE ID has been exploited in the last 90 days, last 30 days, which is the EPSS, tell you if it is actively being exploited, which is the CISA curve. If there is any, it will also tell you more about the vector string when we talk about CVSS of that vulnerability. So NVD is managed by NIST, and is more of what the US government will use when doing analysis for a vulnerability instead of using CVEs, instead of using the CVE website, because it will provide you more details than CVE website will do, right? So, and also remember we say vulnerability scanners relies on a known database for them to get details about CVEs. So these scanners rely on NVD, the National Vulnerability Database. That is the source of truth for the vulnerability scanners. They get the details that they use for the scanning assessment from NVD. And NVD will also provide you the CVSS, which is the common vector string and common vector string scoring system. Yeah. Common vulnerability scoring system. That's the full meaning. And then it will also provide you the CVSS score, the impact matrix, and if there are any actionable information for that CVE. It will also provide you a real-time vulnerability tracking if you subscribe to the email. So if there's an update or a change on a specific CVE and you are subscribed to the email alert, you're going to be receiving emails based on a specific CVE that you subscribe to. Like I said, MVD is managed and maintained by NIST, and it also allows you to do API integration into your own vulnerability management solution. If you have an internal vulnerability management solution and you want to be getting information from the MVD, you can make use of, or you can leverage the API integration that it provides, so that you don't have to be going to MVD website and be checking. You can just stay on your own platform and be retrieving information from the MVD database. This is what CVE database doesn't provide, but MVD allows you to do that. I know. So check the MITRE first. That's true. So that is it about MVD. It's just a central repository for all known vulnerability, providing detailed information for the CV. So let's go ahead and look at one of those vulnerabilities on the MVD website. So go over here. I think it's nist.mvd.gov. Is it .gov? I don't know, but let's see. What just happened? Did I miss something? Nist dot, let me just, this is MVD. Let me look at nist dot, oh, no. This is, okay, it seems like this is the boss. The website doesn't seem good to me. It has an MVD in between. I don't know why it's not showing now, but that's fine. So this is the MVD website. Here you can search for any CV that you want. Where is that? No, this is NIST. This is not the website.
This is typo coding. Make sure.
Yeah, mvd.nist. Yeah, it's right here. mvd.nist.gov. Yeah, this is the right one. This is the right website here. So here you can search for any vulnerability that you want. Where is the search button? Search for CVEs. Here you can search for CVE. Again, let me search for my wonderful CVE right here. So it will show you all, this is the CV I'm searching for. Here, if I click on this CV right here, you will see it provides more detail, including the CVSS scores and metrics. And here it provides you all the vendors that have written about this CV. So you have all the information in one place. So if you go to, this is from the vendor themselves. This is security.paloto.cve. This one is from Unit 42 of the organization as well. This is from CISA Gov, writing about the same CV. This is also from the vendor. This is from Velocity, writing about the same vendor. This is, I think this is just one link. So it provides you a more detail. If any of them doesn't explain it well, one of them will surely explain it better for you. Then it tell you if this has been known as exploited in the CISA database. So it said this CV is in CISA known exploited vulnerability. So the CISA is where you see actively exploited vulnerability at a time. So this guy will tell you if that has been actively exploited. It was, I think you should have a place where you talk about the EPSS, which is the probability of it being exploited in the next 30 days. I guess this CV is too old, so it may not, that information may have been taken away from here. But here you see we have more details about the CVEs than we have in the CVE website. The dates are there, the due date, the action requirements. And what I like about this is the information it provides about the CVSS score. We are going to go through the vector strings soon. But here you have a more central place to learn about a specific CVE, and it also tells you the name, or this is like the, what they call this thing, common platform enumeration. Oh God, what is this again? I've forgotten, but I'll remember it. Okay, this is like the naming convention for the versions of the operating system where you see the issue and where the issue is also fixed. So it provides you a more detail about a specific CVE. So if you do a scan in your environment and this CVE pops up, as part of the result, you're going to have to either, if the scan is able to do integration with this MVD, it will provide you almost all these details that you have here. Or if it doesn't, you can come here and also decide how the CVE works, read more about the CVEs, and who and what have written about that CVE. So ask me your questions, or we'll continue.
Hello,
Questions, go ahead.
This vulnerability, is it only happens in the business environment? What does it happen to individuals? Attack, does it happen to individuals? Because something like this, I've not even experienced it since the years I've been using laptop.
How many times have you scanned your laptop in a year for vulnerability? Let's start from there. Have you ever run a vulnerability scan on your endpoints? Me, I am not doing a business. The firewall, my firewall that was attacked is the home firewall I have in my home. I deployed it at the perimeter of my network at home. I manage the firewall myself. So I don't use it for business. It's a personal firewall I own.
Another thing I wanted
in my home, and it was attacked.
Is this as attack based on region? Like,
it's not region specific. It's not region specific. And if there's a vulnerability that exists, and then if it allows for remote execution, that means anybody can get to it. It's just a matter of time if you don't patch it. It's not region specific.
Okay, because
the only thing is that most people, and I know where you're going with that question, but please don't break this table yet. Don't break that table yet. I know where you're going with that.
Because here in Nigeria, even
I know. How did I say I know?
We are just living life on a slow, on a free this thing. Majority of our windows are cracked.
Let me ask you one question. Right? If you are an attacker and you have the opportunity to, you see a vulnerability in a US-owned computer and a vulnerability on a Nigerian-owned computer, which one do you think you're going to attack first? And tell me your reason. Why would you attack that first?
It's US, because that's where the money is.
Because there is a very high chance that there is a resources on that computer you could take. But
yes.
What resources is it that a Nigerian computer will have, that somebody will have the opportunity that you have opportunity to exploit the vulnerability in a US company, and you're trying to waste your time exploiting, because even if you exploit it in a Nigerian-owned computer, there's a high chance that they won't even know that you are there.
Yes.
They won't even know that you're even there in the first place. But it's very hard for an attacker to be in a sophisticated environment or computer managed by maybe somebody around here, and they will not know unless it is an APT, because APT will take a long time before they will be detected, but it will take a long time before they're detected. Maybe they might have been finishing their work before you detect APTs. But if it's not an APT, you can easily detect when someone is in your environment if you have the good alerting, monitoring, and IDS configured in your environment. But how many of our Nigerian companies or even African companies have perimeter networks secured like that? How many of us do that? It's difficult.
Wow.
So that's all these things you have to manage. And they will know if those computers are where the computers are based, because if you do your scanning, you will get the computer's the server IP address. If it has a domain name attached to it, you can easily pull up the registration details of that domain name and find where it's registered. IP addresses are classified based on their location. You have IPs that are registered in Nigeria, registered in the US, registered in different parts of the world. So once you pull the IP addresses, your location, it will tell you where the IP is located, and you know, okay, if this IP is registered in the US, there is 99% chance that this computer is in the US. So I could easily go for it than getting an IP that is registered in Nigeria. Think about it. Does that answer your question? Does that answer your question? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you clearly.
The person I'm asking, does that answer your question, is not responding to me. Okay. I guess I answered your question. So let's keep going. So that is it about MVD. So let's go into the next one, CVSS. CVSS. So CVSS is like a framework. It's like a framework for classifying and rating severity of vulnerabilities. You see that vulnerability that I put up that has a scoring of 10. How do we know? Who decides this scoring? And how do you give them that scoring? There are some metrics that are calculated for you to give vulnerabilities or CVEs the specified scores, right? So that is where the common vulnerability scoring system comes in. This is a framework that is used to give the severity of vulnerabilities and is ranging from 0 to 10. 0, which you will hardly see, but you will see 1, 2, meaning it's a very small vulnerability, doesn't have too much, but 10, meaning that this is a critical vulnerability and it could be actively being exploited by attackers, and it could also be affecting some organizations, right? So there are different metrics that are considered when before a severity score is given to a vulnerability, and this is called the vector string matrix. It's called the vector string matrix, which have 3 major metrics. We have the base metric, we have the temporal metrics, we have the environmental metrics. Most CVSS scoring system will be working with base metric because these are the elements or the values of that vulnerability that will not change over time. So these are the nature of that vulnerability. As long as they're existing, their nature doesn't change. Then for temporal and environmental metrics, these are organization specific. It does not affect all organizations. It all depends on how your organization wants to classify theirs. But most vulnerabilities will get their severity classification based on the base metric because these are what doesn't change. The temporal metrics and values that varies over the lifespan of the vulnerability. It could change based on the organization that is assessing it or trying to classify it. The exploit code maturity for my environment might not be the same for your environment. Remediation level for me might not be the same for me and for another organization. So the temporal metrics and the environmental metrics are organizational specific metrics. Your organization will decide what those values is going to be for them. But for most vulnerability, when you look at them in the CVE website and the MVD, you will see the base metrics because these are the ones that are used to classify that vulnerability or to give it the severity for that vulnerability. So where we have the attack vector, we have the attack complexity, we have the privilege required, user interaction, scope, and the impact. And these are based on CVSS version 3.1. The latest CVSS version is 4.0, but it is still under development. You guys lose me for a moment?
We lost you, but now we can hear you.
Okay, I think my internet went off for a moment, but it's back as well. So as I was saying, base metric is what you will see in most vulnerability classification and what is used to determine the severity of that vulnerability. And this is based on CVSS version 3.1. The latest one is 4.0, but that is still under development and not really in use by many organizations at this point because they are still trying to collect the metrics that are going to be used to replace these base metrics in version 3.1. So for now, we are going to still stick with the version 3.1 values for the base metrics. So all these things, mostly the base metrics are considered, the value on the base metrics is considered when determining the severity to give a vulnerability. So let's talk about the attack vector. When we talk about the attack vector, this is more like how that attack would happen. Is it happening? Is it only within a whole network? Or is it on a physical device? Or is it only on a local computer where it is? That is what we call the attack vector. Then the attack complexity is what amount of work is required from the attacker's side for them to successfully exploit that vulnerability? Is there a lot of work? Do they need to do quite a lot of work that, at some point they could get discouraged and leave, or they just need to do little or nothing and they will be able to exploit that vulnerability? Privilege required. What is the level of privilege that is required for that vulnerability to be exploited? Do they need to have a super user privilege on that system, or is a read-only system okay? So what amount of privilege, access privilege, do they need on that system to exploit it? User interaction. Do they need any kind of user interaction, or is this something that they can remotely do on their own? User interaction could be, do they need somebody to click a mouse, open a file for them to be able to exploit that vulnerability? Then the scope. The scope is, does exploiting that vulnerability, does it change, or does it escalate to another device or into the entire network, or does it just stay within the locality of where it is exploited? That is the scope. Then we talk about the impact. The impact matrix talk about how this will affect the CIA of that system or the data that is really exploited. Is confidentiality affected? Is integrity affected? Or is availability affected? If they're affected, at what rate are they affected? So when you find the values of these, that will help to give the rating for that vulnerability. Now, let's take a moment and think about attack complexity right now. I don't want to talk about attack vector because that depends on the type of vulnerability, but let's talk about attack complexity. Do you think that if an attacker, if you have a vulnerability right now and your attacker doesn't need to do much for them to get access to that, maybe they only need to open a website or type the IP address of that computer and they're able to exploit it. Compare that to where an attacker needs to maybe get a VPN, be able to get a remote execution done. They have a lot of things to do before they can successfully exploit that vulnerability, than compared to where they don't have much to do. So which one do you think is going to be easier for them to do? I mean, simple sense here. If I don't have to do much to accomplish something, it means it's easier for me. And when an attacker have it easy, then we should be worried that many of them are going to be exploited, compared to when they are going to do a lot of things for them to be able to exploit that. Then privilege required. If an attacker does not need any kind of privilege to attack a system, that means anybody anywhere can attack the system. But if they need something like a super user privilege, so they need an account that have the highest level of privilege, which many organizations will keep secret. They will not let an account that have a very high privilege, like a super user privilege, be roaming around their computers. These days, organizations only have, like if they are working on a firewall, they only have one account that is a super user privilege on that account. And that account, nobody uses it. You don't use a super user privilege account to log into your device because that is a security concern. You only keep it for emergencies or when you want to do something that requires a privilege, super user privilege. So if an attacker needs that kind of privilege to successfully exploit a vulnerability, you will see that it may be difficult for them to get that compared to where they do not need any kind of privilege. So they can easily go in and attack the system. Then user interaction. If an attacker needs somebody to click something, so that means they need our communication, or they need your, or not communication, what word am I looking for? There's a word that's coming to my head and then it leaves again, but I'll find it. That means they need kind of your help to be able to accomplish their goal. If you do not click a button or open the file, they won't be able to exploit that vulnerability. So that means it's not something they can do on their own. They need a second person to help them achieve their goal. And if they don't have that second person available, they won't be able to successfully exploit that. Compare this to a vulnerability that does not need them to do anything. Like, what is that vulnerability? Like a zero click vulnerability, or yes, a social engineering. Thank you so much. A zero click vulnerability that does not need them to click anything. So they can easily exploit that system without user interaction. But if you need a user interaction, that means you're relying on someone's activity for you to successfully exploit that vulnerability. If the user do not take any action, you won't be able to exploit it. So if I have a vulnerability that you are relying on me to take an action before you can do it, and I am aware that you are waiting on me to take an action before you can exploit it, you go, wait, tired now, because I'm not going to do that. Compared to where you do not need my help, you will just go ahead and do your thing, whether I like it or not. Then we talk about the scope. The scope is if they exploit one system, is the attack surface, can the attack surface change? That means can they easily move from the local system where they've exploited to another system? So if the scope can change, then it's a problem. Because it means I can actually go from this computer to the other computer, and they could easily have a privilege escalation. But if the scope remains local on one system and doesn't change, it makes the vulnerability a little contained compared to when it will be able to, when the scope can change. Then the impact, this impact is dependent, because if the vulnerability is exploited, does it affect confidentiality? That means, is the privacy of data affected? Does it affect integrity? Can it alter files without unintentionally? And then can it also affect availability, right? So if the scores of these ones are high and high and high, then you see that the more easy attacker has it, the higher the severity that vulnerability is going to have. The more easy the attacker will have it to exploit that vulnerability, the more severity that vulnerability is going to have. Now, let's take an example with my celebrity vulnerability. This 2024-3400, right? Let's review this. If from the NVD website, I got this CVSS details about that vulnerability. See, the scoring is high. Why was the scoring high? And why was the scoring 10 and the vulnerability was critical? Look at the vector string. We're going to analyze this vector string that we have here. This see the vector string, we're using version 3.1, like I said. See, we have AV, we have AC, we have PR, we have UI, we have all that details. So it's the value of this detail that determines the severity and the score given to this vulnerability. You can see here that, let's look at it. When we talk about AV, AV is the attack vector. What are the values that you can give AV? If the attack vector is just on a whole network, is it on an adjacent computer? Is it local? Or is it physically on that computer? This is the attack vector. So when you do AV, AV can have a value of N, a value of A value of L, or a value of P. For this vulnerability, of course, it was at the network level because it affected the entire firewall. So it was at the network level. So see, the AV here was N because the vulnerability was at the network level. Then we'll talk about attack complexity. How easy did the attacker have it? Was the attack complexity low or was it high? Here you see the attack complexity was low. So it means that the attacker need to do very little thing for them to get in. They didn't have to do much for them to run the code execution on this. So the attack complexity was very low. Then privilege required. Did the attacker needed any kind of privilege for them to exploit this vulnerability? Privilege required was none. They don't need any kind of privilege. So you see why this vulnerability was very high. So they don't need any help from anybody to do anything. They could easily run it by themselves. User interaction. Did this vulnerability needed any user interaction? No, it doesn't need any user interaction. So the attacker can easily exploit it on their own without waiting on anybody to do anything. The scope, was the scope changed? Was it unchanged? So here you see the scope was changed. The scope was C. So it could easily change from the local computer and attack another computer over the network. That was why when this vulnerability came in, once we detect that your computer has been attacked by this vulnerability, we immediately ask customers to cut it off on the website, on the network, cut that system off on the network. because the scope could change. So cut it off on the website, on the network immediately so that it doesn't affect the rest of your network. And it needs to be isolated before we can even start remediation. If you don't isolate it, we're not going to start remediation for all our customers. Once we know that they have been affected, the first thing we have them do is isolate this firewall from the rest of your network, put it on a different network, and make sure that you have a console access to this firewall before we even start remediation. That's because we know that the scope of this vulnerability could change. You could be saying you are on one firewall, before you know it, you're already on another firewall. So it could easily use the privilege escalation for it. So the scope here was C. Then look at the impact. The C is H, I is H, and A is H. So this vulnerability could attack confidentiality. What is the impact on confidentiality? Is it none? Is it low? Is it high? Impact on confidentiality was high, which is of course true because it could do a code injection. So the confidentiality was very high. Integrity, this vulnerability runs a code execution. So it will change the file integrity on the firewall, which is why even after we do a regular, factory reset, the artifact from the exploited vulnerability was still present on the firewall, which was why we now sorted out for advanced factory resets to be able to take out that artifact. Otherwise, the integrity of the files on the firewalls, we are really, really affected. Then availability, this was the rest of the story. Availability, because it could shut down a firewall, and when it shut down your system, of course, availability is affected. I personally experienced this one because once my firewall went down, my entire network went down. I had to go and bypass the firewall for me to recover my network before I got a new firewall. So when they put all these details together in the CVSS score, they will be able to find a better score for that vulnerability and then detect the severity. If it was low, if it is high, if it is medium, if it's informational, or if it is critical. And that will also decide the score for this CVSS. Let's look at the other CVSS and see what different vector strings were and why that one was scored as 6 point something and it was medium as well. While I'm looking for that vulnerability, ask your questions. Ask me your questions. Let me pull up another vulnerability that is not rated this high. I think I can pull that out from CVE would do more better for me. But I can pull it up from here as well. Let me find it. So let me search for the other CV, the other vulnerability. If you have any vulnerability ID in mind, tell me, I will look it up. These ones are the ones that I work with very frequently, so I have them. Oh, if you have another vendor, oh, sorry, yeah, this is correct. But this is not on CSCAV. Okay, that means it wasn't that big of a deal. So let's look at this one. This one, I want to do 3.0 back. Okay, now let's look at the vulnerability, the vector string for this vulnerability. See, the base score is 7.5 and the severity is high. So the CVSS score for this guy was 7.5 and the severity was high. Why was it scored that way? If you look at the attack vector, yeah, this is also a network attack because it was on the firewall. Then the AC, which is attack complexity was low, privilege requirement was none. Now, where the difference lies in this one is the scope. The scope of this one is unchanged. So this one, you won't be able to escalate to extra computers or extra systems in the network. The attack is going to be just local to that system where it is. So you see the scope here was unchanged. And you see here confidentiality. If this guy is exploited, it does not affect confidentiality. It does not affect integrity, but it do affect availability in some way. So this guy is not that much of how do I put it? the impact here is not much compared to the impact of the other vulnerability. So that is why this guy was scored high. If you see any vulnerability that was scored as critical, you will know that that exploitation is very easy for the attacker. Attacker can easily exploit that vulnerability compared to the ones that they will not need to do much. Let me look for another vulnerability. That log4j, log4j was a big one as well, but I don't know the CVID for log4j. Let me search it. CVID for log4j. What was the CVE for that log4j vulnerability? Yeah, it was 2021. It was okay. I think it was this vulnerability. Let me look for this. So you see this one again. This is a celebrity vulnerability. This log4j. Logshare, this was a celebrity vulnerability because it affected a lot of vendors. Log4j it's like a library that is used in most Linux operating systems. And you know that except from Microsoft, most vendors, their operating system distros do run on Linux. So most of them had this vulnerability. So it was a celebrity vulnerability. And you look at the score, the base score was 10 and it was critical. Look at all the values here, checks out as the one that we had on the other one. So the attack vector was network, the attack complexity was low, there was no privilege required, user interaction was none, scope is going to change, and then confidentiality, integrity, and availability are all high. So when all this applies and it makes it easy for an attacker to actually exploit this, you see that vulnerability will get a severity of critical and a base score of 10, which is the highest any vulnerability can have. Celebrity vulnerability. Please ask your question. It is still a nightmare on legacy system. Oh yes, it is still a very nightmare on legacy. I still see some customers that say that they have not been able to patch this vulnerability. This log4j vulnerability. I've seen a lot of people that are still not able to patch it. But then the computers have been, they are running those computers on isolated environment, not part of their entire network. So it's still a very big nightmare for legacy systems as well. Ask your questions, please. Ask me your questions. So, Solomon, soon now you tell me you are lost. Tiwan, Emmanuel, Abbas, Simeon, ask me your question. Oh, one of our instructors joined our call. Hey, thank you so much for dropping by.
So, Ma, I want to ask.
Go ahead.
This vulnerability now, how can we do like practice and get to know more in the environment?
You practice the vulnerability when you do vulnerability management program, right? So in there, that is where, first of all, like I said, when we're talking about the life cycle of vulnerability management, first of all, you need to know the asset that you have. You have the asset, then you run a scan on that asset. You don't need to be in a working environment or a production environment for you to run vulnerability. I do run vulnerability assessments on all the computers connected to my network at least once every 3 months. I do run it. I use the Tenable. I use the Tenable Nessus, the free version. That's what I use. I installed it in one of my lab on one of my hypervisors. So every 3 months, I pick up an IP address. First of all, I do Nmap to discover whatever is on my network, and then I use the Tenable to run a vulnerability scan, and it will report me which of the systems are vulnerable and which CVE they are vulnerable to, and then I will come and check on NVD or CVE about that vulnerability, see how much it will impact my environment. If that vulnerability doesn't affect, I don't have any resources here now that I say anybody is coming in to check or to take. This is just my home network, but it's also part of how I keep myself updated on the latest vulnerabilities that are available, So when I run those vulnerabilities, I come and check what are the impact of this vulnerability. Is it going to cause a major damage to my environment? If it does, I will go ahead and patch it. If it does not, I ignore that vulnerability. I don't have to patch it. So that is where the how you're going to mitigate the vulnerability comes in. If you're going to mitigate it, if you're going to accept it, sometimes I just accept it if it's not going to cause me major damage in my environment. So you can, if you have a network, a home network that you run or you organize or you maintain, like I do, you can be running a vulnerability scan on them, get the vulnerability IDs, and then go through the details of them, look at the patching details, and see how you can patch the vulnerability. If you're working for an organization and your duty is, and you are the vulnerability assessment specialist, you are going to be running this on both network devices, endpoint devices, on softwares, and then you provide reports to the organization, including how to remediate, and then you run a retest when they say they are done remediating, if you're not the one that is going to be remediating the vulnerability. So your job in a production environment as a vulnerability assessment specialist would be to run this vulnerability using whatever platform that the organization has purchased or is using, tailor down the vulnerability to a specific report, and then provide it to the technical team for them to remediate. I've come across a lot of time when my customers told me that their SOC team has run a vulnerability on the firewall, and these and these were cropping up on the firewall, and they now ask us how are they going to remediate this vulnerability since it was found on the firewall. So most of the time, we will just go and look up the CV they provided and share the remediation with them, and then they will patch their environment.
All right, ma'am.
Go ahead.
Please, is there any simulator that you can walk us through to test this vulnerability and how to report it? I don't know if it is.
I'm not at home. I'm streaming from somewhere else. If I was at home and I don't have my other laptop where I could remotely go into my computer, where I run the tests, where I run my Nessus tests, I don't have access to that computer from where I am right now because I didn't plan to log into that lab environment today, which was so dumb of me. I would have made that arrangement, at least to run that report. But we can make our time over the week. I will do that once I get home. I'm not at home. I should be home later this evening. So tomorrow is work. But if you people want to see us run the reports and go through it, we can schedule something over the week and we'll do it. That's not a problem at all. That is, if you guys want and you promise to attend the session, not the one I will come on session, I will not see anybody. If I see only 10 people, I will not do it too. I will just go away. So if you guys arrange, you want to do it, we can choose a day, we'll come here, we'll run it with a Tenable Nessus, the free version that I have. I will run it maybe I will see if I will run a report on either my firewall or the computer connected on my network or my IoT device. It doesn't really provide anything much, but I will get something, obviously. I'm going to get something and we can walk through the report. We can walk through the results together. But that is if you guys agree to attend the session. For me, I don't have a problem. Tell me day and when, and I'll be here. Questions. I know, Missy. I know. I mean, I know I was taking this topic today. The least I could have done was make a provision to assess that my lab environment. But I guess I was too busy with other things. That's why. And I didn't think they were going to be interested in it anyway. Next week, Sunday, I don't think I'm not going to, just a moment, I'm not going to shift it to next week, Sunday. I have another thing to do on Sunday. I don't want to come on Sunday and be doing, using the time to be doing Nessus scanning, please. So it will have to be a day in the week between Monday and Friday. Tell me the time. Anything from 6 p.m. Western time, Western African time, I should be available to do it. Oh, sorry, anything from 7 p.m. Western African time, I beg. So you guys will not impeach in my working hours. Tiwan, go ahead with your question.
like when you're doing the test, the vulnerability testing, like what happens if like you find something but a patch was already there for that? Like what caused that error to happen?
The patch is not available on the scan results, or that even CV doesn't have a patch for it. Which one?
If the CV has a patch for it already, but when you do the test, you find out that there's some vulnerabilities in it.
So
Like
you
what
find the
caused that?
vulnerability, but then
Yeah.
you want to remediate it. Even CV website and MVD doesn't provide any patch for it. Is that it?
Yes.
So in that case, the first of all, CVs vulnerabilities are software, um, software vendor specific or hardware specific, right? So for you to find it, find the CV ID, it means that that is already a known CV. So if there is no patch for it, two things are involved. Is either one, you're running a legacy system that the organization doesn't, maybe the organization does not exist anymore, so they don't provide a patch for it, or there must be a kind of a compensating control you can put in place. Like, example, if that vulnerability is exploited over a specific port on a firewall or a system, you could block that port so that the traffic wouldn't go in. But if it has a CVID, trust me, you will have either, there must be a workaround. There must be a workaround or a compensating control or a full permanent patch. If it does not, that means that is a legacy system that they no longer provide a patch for. I'll give you an example. If you're running Windows 10, because you know that Windows 10 is out of support for Microsoft, right? So if you find a vulnerability that affects operating systems, it could be that it affects Windows 11, Windows 10, and all that. But the patch is provided only for Windows 11, but you are running Windows 10, and the patch does not work on Windows 10. Number one is that Windows 10 is already considered the legacy operating system. So Microsoft does not, they no longer provide a patch or an update for Windows 10. So in that case, this is the kind of scenario you're asking about, right? She's muted.
Yes.
So in that case, the software you're running is a legacy application. The vendor will not provide you a patch for it. So you have to update, or you treat it as a legacy computer and isolate it out of your network. Make sure that it is not externally discoverable, so that it stays only within a specific subnet or a specific DMZ, a specific segment of your network that is not available. But if the system is public facing, meaning it can be accessed over the internet, my dear, the only option is to upgrade it, because once a system reaches EOS, end of life or end of service, the vendor will not be providing you any more patch for it. So you have to upgrade to their latest version for you to continue getting patches. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
All right. All right. Questions. We are rounding up. Are we meeting over the week to go through the lab on this, or are we not meeting? Because I did not prepare to do lab today. I didn't even prepare to even write, Steph. I don't have my writing board. So are we meeting or not?
So what day will be a better day for you?
Next week, I have an appointment tomorrow afternoon.
I'm always available.
I have appointment tomorrow afternoon. On Tuesday, I should be free Tuesday, Wednesday. I have meeting on Thursday. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Anything from 7 o'clock West African time, which will be my 1 p.m. I'll be available.
Monday afternoon.
Monday afternoon. I take Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. That's what I said. Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday.
We could do Tuesday.
Okay. Tuesday is okay, man. Tuesday is very much fine.
And we are agreeing on Tuesday because it means I will move things around, which I don't mind moving around. But where I will have a problem is I move things around and I come and I don't see you guys. That's where I will have a very big problem.
We are coming, man.
It will be what time in US time? Eastern.
Eastern time, it will be 2 p.m. Eastern time because it will be my 1 p.m. I'm on Central time. So it will be my 1 p.m., which will be 2 p.m. Eastern time. I know, it's a work hour for us.
I'll be driving home.
Those in West African time is their evening. And I think the latest they can do could be that 8 p.m. or 9 p.m., which I don't know how free you guys are. Me, I know I will be able to move things around. It's my work hour, but I will move things around. I'll be available. But where I'll have a problem is that I go through moving things around and then I come, I don't see anybody. You people will repay my time that I moved around. What I'm supposed to do, you people will pay for all of it.
I mean, is it possible for you to maybe have a recording for us to watch? Because I also have to work. But I can watch the recording if that's possible.
I can do recording. It's even easier for me to do recording. I could do it this night when I get home, depending on how sleepy my eyes is. But recording will be easier for me. And if you guys prefer recording, that's okay. I can record it between now and tomorrow, and I will post it out.
You know, most things with recording is that you'll be able to ask questions on the go.
I am not too far. I am not too far. You can always pick me up.
But you know, when you are teaching and you like any question and we have to like call you back to that one immediately, then you explain it and we keep going. But then we have to watch it through, chat you when you are free, you reply. And so but I think what Tiwa is saying is if you can have the class on Tuesday and still send her
and then
like,
record the class as well.
A record. Yes.
I can do that. Well. I can do that. That's not a problem at all. I do record my sessions though, so I can do it. I can record the session.
I know that's fixed day I'll be available. So I hope there's no penalty for that.
You won't be available.
I'm going to work. I'm not on time.
Okay.
I'll be available.
No,
So
it's not. I'm not taking attendance for that day because even it's not part of the main class. But if you guys say we will have it. I expect you guys to show up, but I'm not taking attendance for that day. But then you still have to show up.
I will be using my phone. I'll be using my phone actually, but not my system.
Okay. Okay. So any other question? We're already at the top of the hour. It's already 2 o'clock. I have a party to go attend, guys. So it's a weekend. Let me take my weekend seriously. Questions before I So we agreed we are meeting when? Wednesday, 7 p.m. West African time, which is 1 p.m. my time. Is that a deal or no deal? Oh, how did I went 2 hours without my glasses? My sight is getting better. I'm beginning to see clearly.
You said 1 p.m. at your end?
Yeah, 7 p.m. Nigerian time.
Okay, that's fine. On Wednesday, right?
Yeah, Wednesday works for me.
Okay.
Yeah, it should work for me. I'll move things around. All
right, that's fine.
Okay, if that is the deal, then I will put it on my calendar so I can remember it. And I expect to see you guys here. We're gonna do the lab on Nesustainable. That is one that provides a free version. So we're going to run a scan. I'll also see if I can install Metasploitable in my lab so we can run the scan of Metasploitable. That will give us more vulnerability because Metasploitable is a vulnerable VM used for teaching cybersecurity mostly. So I will see if I'm able to install Metasploitable in my hypervisor, and we can run the scan on that Metasploitable and see what we get instead of running it on my actual network. All right, so if you don't have any other question, that's all I got for today. And Ehis, thank you so much for dropping by. One of our facilitator dropped by. Thank you so much. How is it going?
It's going well. I enjoyed the class. I'm also learning, you know.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate you dropping by. Okay, guys. Let me stop recording. If there's anything else I want to say, I doubt it. Wait a minute. I thought I was recording this. Okay.